opportunity to welcome everybody to the 7th annual Edmund Fitzgerald tribute event. We did take a year off for the COVID, but we're back, and we're ready to thank everybody for coming out tonight for this very special evening. From the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate everybody coming out to this event, and we're going to start things off in a little bit different way this evening. Bob Bogatti, my technical advisor, and I got together with two very special people who have a connection to the story, and we thought we'd do this in order to create the setting and the mood for the evening before I start my presentation. But it is a very important event. This time of year, my thoughts always turn towards the crew of the Edmund Fitzgerald after Halloween time. And so this is one of the things that inspired me to create this event, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But right now, we thought we'd get started with the prologue, I call this, to the Edmund Fitzgerald event. And we have two testimonials from two people. The first is Jim Rankin, who is our piper. And there's a lot of connections that you're going to see throughout this evening. And one of the connections is that Jim Rankin, besides being a tremendous bagpiper, also worked on the Great Lakes, including Lake Superior. So I thought it would be an interesting connection to talk to Jim. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to these two video clips, and I hope you enjoy them, and then afterwards I will begin my presentation.
I've been sailing at the Great Lakes, and I'm a piper, have been a piper for this, the Edmund Fitzgerald ceremony for something like 5 years. So one thing that I want to start with is just a connection that I have with the Edmund Fitzgerald. Going to school, my first year in the Maritime College, 1975. 1975, of course, in November is when the Edmund Fitzgerald song. It caused quite a concern at the school, and there were it was military school, and there were a lot of lessons learned that were taught during that time from 75 to 79. My first ship getting out of school was the Wasabi Miner. The Wasabi Miner is a 1,000-footer, and
1,000 feet.
it also has a sister ship, James R. Parker, who sailed on that, and also sailed on the William J. Delancey. At the time, it was the William J. Delancey, and it has since been rechristened the Traversa. Right now, that's the largest ship on the Great Lakes. They all carry taconite ore, predominantly on the order of somewhere around 60,000 tons of iron ore on the trip. They occasionally carry coal. We've gone to several generating stations and dropped off some coal for them. During that time, in the 70s, late 70s, as a consequence of the Edmund Fitzgerald sinking, there was an emphasis on the new survival suits, and putting the survival suits on, and seeing how fast you could get them on. And there were drills that we had, several drills, actually many drills, lifeboat drills, and seeing how fast we could get the lifeboats down. And I know that the Edmund Fitzgerald was well known for kind of being competitive, carrying a lot of ore and delivering it as fast as they could, and maybe delivering a little more than each time that they could. And when Sabi Minor, James R. Barker was no different. When the 1,000-footers were christened and commissioned, there still was quite a bit of competition, seeing how fast we could deliver this order. And Sabi Minor was dubbed Queen of the Lakes. This is the little painting that was down in the engine room, and they were known for delivering and unloading approximately 60,000 tons within 6 hours. And if we could try to best that 6 hours, it was a win for us. Sometimes what would happen is we would overload the conveyors, have to shut down and shovel. Not a fun thing. Taconite is very dirty. It's kind of a purple, dusty color, and when you've got that much of it in a conveyor, it causes quite a bit of dust. One story that I always tell is when the Edmund Fitzgerald did sink not far from Whitefish, and there was always an eerie feeling every time we went over or in that area, especially when I was down in the engine room and I was down, in the bilges, and there was just a sense of just a heaviness.
I'm a resident here at the village of Lewiston. I lived here for a longer period of time than I actually lived in Minnesota. I was born in Duluth, and most of my childhood revolved around Lake Superior, and the fact that my father worked on an area called the Arrowhead Bridge, and he had been involved in an accident where the old bridge was actually connected. He was a crane operator, and the guy next to him fell to his death. My dad luckily survived, and that's why I'm still here. So I lived along Lake Superior in Duluth for the first 10 years, and that's where I really was introduced to the aerial bridge, which is the connecting piece. We know that the Great Lakes itself all has its history, starts with Duluth, Minnesota. And that is the city where everything else involved in the Great Lakes comes from. So my uncle was a captain. He had 3 ships himself out of Duluth, Superior, the 2 sister cities. And then the boats would come in and out of the channel there. And part of the beach was actually sandy, and the other part was complete rocky situation. So a lot of people would go down to what was called Harp Point, which is where the aerial bridge is. It's a lift bridge. You go up and down, you can wait your turn if you're passing over some railroad cars or whatever. And then you could actually see Lake Superior, and you could watch the ships. That's what we did. We watched them come in, come out of the harbor, and it was something that we went to usually most nights of the week when my dad would come home from work. My mom always wanted to get out of the house. So she said, let's go to Park Point. And your friends owned the actual little ice cream place and burger place down there. So they'd be chatting with them. And of course, I was kind of scooping around looking at everything else and get my hands stuck in the telephone booth or do something crazy while I was down there. But we loved going there. And because my uncle was very involved with the Great Lakes, and my father had the opportunity to move and take another position, which would be outside Duluth, another hour and a half up what was called the Arrowhead, which is Highway 61, one of the most beautiful routes in the United States of America. And if you've never been so we moved, and my dad wound up working in a place called Taconite Harbor, which obviously refers to the taconite, the small pellets that are made of the remains of the digging for the iron ore, the trailings, they would call it, that were melted in together, and then it made a little ball about the size of a marble. So those were the pellets, and that's what was loaded in and off the ships throughout the Great Lakes to bring them to the other communities, and of course then made into steel. So I also had an uncle that had a steel plant ownership, and so it's all kind of intermeshed with all of them, but it all revolves basically about Duluth. So we lived in what was called Taconite Harbor, which is a very remote area, and there were homes that were built for the workers that were coming. My father worked the Welland crane, which would help load and unload a lot of times of the coal or the pellets itself that were brought by the railroads or ships. And it was just this hub of activity. So we were always allowed to go on the boats, and my dad wanted to take us, we could go. And we never thought anything of the fact that that would be something that, of course, any visitors would be dragged along as well. And my dad was very proud to show the boats. So I can remember going as a really young girl, even to Duluth and again out of Taconite Harbor. And one of the boats that I saw, and we were at Taconite Harbor, or again in Superior, Wisconsin, where my uncle had taken me, was the Edmund Fitzgerald. And also passed our house many times. I could look at Lake Superior from my kitchen. My mother had a pair of binoculars on the window, so she charted the boats and knew what was coming and going. Good weather, bad weather, whatever was happening. But the Edmund Fitzgerald was one that you knew when you saw it. It was majestic. It was bigger than all the rest. I can remember the white part where the pilot was in the top section, the white section, and then of course the beautiful maroon bottom. And always said Edmund Fitzgerald. And I always thought, gee, usually they have a middle initial, but this one doesn't seem to. Maybe she doesn't need it. And the other one that I learned later that was such a big part of her story was the Anderson, which would have been the following ship that was trying to help the Edmund Fitzgerald through that rough patch of the night that the ship went down. So I was on with Edmund Fitzgerald, and it amazes me that she didn't make that voyage. But if anybody was going to try to get through that storm, she would.
These videos are available on YouTube. The links will be posted below.
There's Harry Reasoner again.
The storm with 80-mile-an-hour winds that wave heights up to 25 feet, all of the mountains and oil slightly up the way.
Okay, friends, my annual disclaimer that I am an enthusiast. I'm not an expert in any areas, but I do have a keen interest in this topic ever since I was a little kid. This is the format of tonight's program. We had the prologue featuring Jim Rankin and Claudia Morasco and their testimonials. I'm going to be doing my presentation. A little bit later, there will be an explanation of the various artifacts that we have on display over here. Then we have the very reverential tolling of the bell, 29 times for the sailors who lost their life on November 10, 1975, but also one extra tolling of the bell for all the sailors who've lost their lives on the Great Lakes and beyond. Then we have Piper Jim Rankin with his Amazing Grace tribute. And then, of course, the wonderful musical tribute by Bruce, Jamie, Dave, and Jeremy, starting with Gordon Lightfoot's ballad, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald from 1976. And then also some selections of music that the sailors may have listened to when they were working on this ship from that era. The kind of music that you'd be listening to in your Cutlass on an 8-track tape or maybe on the radio back in the day. I've got to express extreme gratitude and thanks to the following. Of course, the Lewiston Council on the Arts. And congratulations, they'll be retiring after this season. Of course, in 2014, during the Discovery series that they started, they were doing the art of chocolate, the art of this, the art of that, and they had various presenters, and they asked me to present. So instead of presenting about my art, I thought I'd try something a little bit different, because my friends and I had a little impromptu tribute event at my old art gallery, and that is what evolved into the Edmund Fitzgerald tribute event, which is really a memorial. Okay, a memorial is designed to honor an event or a person. In this case, the event would be the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald, and of course the people would be the sailors who lost their lives. Of course, Ken Bryant and the Brickyard and the BBC have been there from the very beginning. When I was coming up with the idea of how to do this, we were thinking about the Opera Hall, and I said, you know, I think we should have it in a tavern, because in my mind, the ballad the Gordon Lightfoot wrote is kind of a drinking song in a way. And back in the day, ballads were sung at taverns in Europe and beyond. The news of the day was shared by traveling troubadours or minstrels, and they would tell the news of the day, or they'd tell histories, and a lot of times they were set to a beat from a drummer who would sit in the corner. So I thought that would be a good venue. And of course, Ken offered us the back room at the Brickyard at the time, and we started in 2014, and we're keeping it going. Paul Beatty II for all his support, and of course Paul Beatty III, and they're working behind the scenes tonight, and I really appreciate their assistance. Of course, the Commodore, Justin Higner. Many years ago at the Allentown Art Festival, I met this young guy wearing a Commodore's cap, and he was showing me photographs of all these constructions that he was making, this wonderful art of maritime themes, and I've been friends with him ever since. And he has some fine models on display over there. Of course, the Edmund Fitzgerald, the tugboat. Bruce and Jamie and Dave and Jeremy. Bruce and Jamie have been there since the beginning, and then we added Dave and Jeremy later on, and great connections there. Jeremy Boyle, who's the lead singer of the Strictly Hip, he actually grew up in Port Colborne, and when he was in chorus class in elementary school, one of the songs that they sang was The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, so another great connection there. Of course, John and Todd Havens, they present the music every year, and they brought a beautiful piece to display over there of We're Holding Our Own. Bruce Andrews always supports this event because Great Lakes Realty, of course, and we have the Great Lakes theme with the presentation tonight. Mr. Bob Borgatti, aka Bobby, has been helping me since the beginning with filming and technology, and I really appreciate all of his support. My brother John, Johnny A, he created a beautiful model over here, and that was displayed from the very beginning. So that's really exciting, and we grew up in the summer at the cottage, at Rosie's Cottage on Lake Erie, and always going into Port Colborne and watching the ships go through the Welland Canal, and I've always been fascinated with the large ships, and of course each and every one of you, because this event would not be successful without all the people who turn out every year to support it, and it's great. It's a fundraiser for the Art Council, and we're trying to put the fun back in fundraiser. So the next one. So I talked about some of this stuff already. The shipwreck on November 10th, 1975 was really the genesis of this event. And of course in 1976, when Gordon Lightfoot came out with his ballad, the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, it was all over the airways, and we used to listen to it at home, at the cottage, up at Honey Harbor, with the Bouchards, and I just love the lyrics of the song, because a ballad is a song that tells a story, and it's a great story, and throughout history, you have, in theater, you have comedies, and you have tragedies, and this is a tragic tale. And it's important, I think, to share this story at least once a year. So then when I was in 9th grade at Gaskill, junior high school, they used to call it back in the day, my English teacher, Bill Greenman, we were doing a unit on ballads, and he used the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald as an example of a contemporary ballad. And that always stuck in my mind, and I think we all can look back in history to some teacher, or maybe more than one teacher, who inspired us. Come from a long line of educators in my family, and of course I think it's really important to educate people, and of course you're constantly learning, and learning never ends. So then one year I was visiting my sister in Philadelphia, and on NPR they had a story of the Edmund Fitzgerald, and it brought it back into my mind, and so I decided I'm going to start studying this. And one thing that I do, if I want to learn more about something, I invented an art lesson for my students at school, because it forces me to do research. And the kids also would write in art journals. And so by reading the topics that they wrote about, it educated me further, because a teacher doesn't just teach, a teacher learns also from their students. It goes both ways. So I decided to do a tribute lesson at school, where we would take the idea of a tribute, listening to this musical tribute by Gordon Lightfoot, and have the kids learn the story, and then they were going to create a visual tribute. So I had a student teacher, Matthew Sinclair Conroy, at the time, and together we developed this lesson for kids, and I just started doing it again today. And it's a great lesson, and the kids really seem to be interested in it, and I think it's important to teach them about the history, because you're talking about everyday heroes, okay? And I think it's important to honor these people who do these day-to-day jobs that are so important, so essential to all of us. So then one year at my old art gallery, we decided to have a little ceremony. So I told my brother John to bring the boat down, and we got a little bell, and we had the names of the 29 sailors, and we got some Edmund Fitzgerald porter. And we played the song, and we displayed the boat. And many people refer to us as nerds, but we sipped the Edmund Fitzgerald porter. And so not long after that, the Lewiston Council of the Arts, as I said before, decided to do this Discovery series, and I said, let's try something different. And they decided it was a good idea, and so we started doing it, and here we are 7 years later, and we're commemorating the shipwreck and the 29 men who lost their life. So we started off at the Brickyard. For a couple of years we took it to the Water Street Landing, and that was kind of nice. It was right on the river, where the waters from the Great Lakes flowed right outside the window. We had some conflicts, because I always tried to do it close to the actual date, which is November 10th. And you'll notice tonight's November 3rd. I actually tried to get November 10th, but they had an event next week, so I thought it would be better to do it earlier than later. And at that time, the BBC opened, so we brought it back to the BBC, where we're at tonight. And we got Great Lakes Brewing involved as a sponsor, and we did that for a number of years. And they were very generous to the Art Council. And then one year, Ken and the brewers here, John Latier was here at the time, and Tom Winter, they said, why don't we brew our own beer? And I said, okay, if you guys are going to do that, it has to be called Gitche Gumee. Because Gitche Gumee is what the Native American Indians called Lake Superior. It means big sea water, okay? And so they agreed to do that. And so then we said, well, we're just going to go local. We're not going to involve Great Lakes Brewery anymore. We're going to move to a new chapter. So that was last year, and this year they have Gitche Gumee available once again. And I'm going to go to the next slide. I said that there's going to be a lot of connections tonight throughout this whole presentation. Okay, the connection, of course, is a relationship in which a person, thing, or idea is linked or associated with something else. And then one of the connections, of course, is Aunt Rosie's cottage. Growing up, we used to spend our summers at Aunt Rosie's cottage, which is pink. That's actually my little brother Bill and I standing in front of it next to the yellow station wagon. That's Aunt Rosie on the left. And we would go to Port Colborne all the time to get fresh bread and go to the hardware store and look at the toys and stuff. And of course, look at the giant ships going through the Welland Canal. So that was something that inspired us. And a tribute. This is the tribute event. A tribute is a gift or service showing respect, gratitude, or affection, or paying homage or homage to something. There's going to be a lot of different examples of tributes woven throughout this presentation. Of course, one of the greatest tributes, if not the greatest tribute, is Gordon Lightfoot's song, which was released in August of 1976. It was a #1 hit. He thinks to this day it's his finest work. And I think it's one of the greatest songs ever. And it's wonderful that he just recently came here and he still sings it to this day, 83 years old. Now, he was inspired by an article in Newsweek magazine. Okay, he read this article and he started writing down his ideas for the song. And that's how an artist sometimes gets inspired from something like a magazine. This is Bill Greenman. That was my 9th grade English teacher who inspired me, and he's blowing bubbles out of his little pipe there. Thank you, Bill Greenman. And of course, here is the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, born in 1958. Here's some facts about the Mighty Fitz. Okay, this was the longest ship in the Great Lakes at the time, 729 feet long, and it was just 75 feet wide, and it was just the size of it fit into the sea locks by 1 foot, and on each side it was just clear, so it just met the dimensions of the Sioux lock at Sault Ste. Marie. And its maiden voyage, of course, was on September 24th, and it weighed 13,000 tons. Okay. Pilot house is in the front. We have all the hatch covers going down. There's 21 hatch covers. They weigh 14,000 pounds apiece. And of course, in the back, we have the engine room. Some more facts. Okay, 84 million to build. All right, 15,000 people were estimated to be there at the launch on July 7th, 1958. Now, of course, people always ask, in relation to the Titanic, how big was the Edmund Fitzgerald? Well, it was only 150 feet smaller than the Titanic, okay? Now, the shipwreck, as you can see, it's only 530 feet of water, so actually the ship is taller than the water that the shipwreck lies in. Okay, and one of the nicknames was the Pride of the American Sign, or the Pride of the American Fleet. And it was built of steel to carry steel. It carried taconite pellets, just like the vessels that Jim Rankin was on. And I actually have some taconite pellets over there that you can examine later. These would be heated in blast furnaces, and you add carbon to it, that's how you made steel. And like one load that the Edmund Fitzgerald could carry could make 7,500 cars. This is a diagram. You can see at the bottom there's ballast tanks, there's the cargo hold, and there's tunnels on each side that the crew can walk back and forth on the ship. And it had 3 holes, 3 compartments where the taconite pellets were stored, with bulkheads in between. Okay? The owner was the Columbia Transportation Division of Old Norton, and they actually paid for the ship for a 25-year lease before it was even built. It was financed by the Northwest Mutual Insurance Company as an investment. And it was built at Great Lakes Engineering Works. Now, something I learned the other day is that this particular shipyard was actually idle for a couple of decades, and all of a sudden they built 3 large ships, and they needed the steel right away. So that might factor in a little bit later when we talk about the demise of the ship. Over 15,000 people were in attendance, okay? And for those people who are superstitious, Elizabeth Fitzgerald, who was the wife of Edmund Fitzgerald, had the honor of breaking the bottle of champagne on the bow of the ship to christen it. And what happened was she tried to strike it one time and it didn't break. And then she struck it a second time, it didn't break. And then on the 3rd try, it finally broke. And many mariners saw that as a bad omen, okay, as bad luck. Then there was this awkward launch, which caused a huge wave to roll up into the crowd, and then the ship righted itself and slammed into the dock. And when this huge wave went across, a 58-year-old man died of a heart attack. Okay, another example of bad luck. When it slammed into the dock, it actually damaged the steel plates, and some of them had to be repaired. Okay. So I think we might take a look at the christening flag. It was a big deal, as you'll see. People are dressed up in suits and dresses, and there's little motor boats that are out there watching it. And the crew looks very proud, walking around. Not the crew, but the men who built it. And this is, the superstructure is not on the ship yet. They wanted to get it in the water before they constructed the rest of it. Okay? They had grandstands set up. This was a big deal. They also had difficulty sliding it down the ramps. And there's a photograph of the men who built it up on top of it that you'll see a little bit later. And it's interesting to note that there's 29 men who are standing up there, and that's the amount of sailors who lost their lives on November 10th, 1975. These guys are my favorite. They're going to get a shot in the beer or something.
A link to this video will be posted below.